So, what happens when a member of Congress reports a sudden multi-million-dollar surge in their family's assets? Well, that's the big question driving a federal investigation into Representative Ilhan Omar and her husband's finances. Let's dive in and break down what the reporting shows us.
Just so we're all on the same page, for this explainer, all the information and figures we're about to go through are drawn directly from public reporting by the Shasta Beacon as of January 2026. We're here to lay out the facts just as they've been presented.
The entire investigation, really, it all boils down to one thing: a massive, and I mean massive, and very sudden increase in the valuation of companies linked to Omar's husband, Tim Mynett. Let's take a look at the actual numbers. Okay, get this. According to financial disclosures from 2024, one of the companies, a venture firm called Roselake Capital, was valued at a high-end estimate of $25 million. But what makes that number so incredible is where that valuation was just 1 year before. Just look at this timeline. In 2023, the very same company was valued somewhere between a single dollar and $1,000. A year later, it rockets up to between $5 million and $25 million. That is an absolutely staggering leap. And it wasn't just that one company. A second business, a winery called East Crew LLC, saw a pretty similar jump. Its valuation went from a max of $50,000 in 2023 to as high as $5 million just 12 months later. Now, Representative Omar has clarified the situation with this statement. She emphasizes that these huge numbers are for the total companies, not what's in her personal bank account. In fact, she states her own net worth is actually somewhere between negative $40,000 and $115,000. So what exactly are these companies that saw their value explode overnight? I mean, to really understand the questions investigators are asking, we need to take a closer look at the businesses themselves, starting with that venture firm. Well, when investigators started digging into Roselake Capital, they found a few things that, let's say, raised some eyebrows. For starters, it's not registered with the SEC. Its business status was actually revoked in D.C. for unpaid taxes. And then there was this enormous claim of managing $60 billion in assets that just couldn't be substantiated. So the second company in question is East Crew LLC, that winery we mentioned that's valued at up to $5 million. But, for a business with that kind of valuation, you'd probably expect to see a physical place, right? A vineyard, maybe a tasting room, something. This led investigators to ask a very, very simple question. Where is it? And it turns out the official registered address for this supposed multi-million-dollar winery is a mailbox. Yep, a mailbox inside a shipping outlet called Postal Plus, located in a little shopping center. Not exactly the sprawling Napa Valley vineyard you might have been picturing. And to add to the puzzle, the company has very little verifiable activity. Its online presence is pretty much dormant, and it's now reportedly trying to sell off its intellectual property. All these questions about the companies, well, they naturally lead you to the people behind them. And at the center of all this is Representative Omar's husband, Tim Mynett, and his consulting firm. So who is Tim Mynett? He's got a background as a political consultant, and he's worked for various Democratic campaigns. He married Representative Omar back in 2020. It's also been noted in the reporting that he doesn't have a background or credentials in investment banking, which is the field Roselake Capital is supposed to be in. Okay, here's another number you need to know, and it's a key part of the investigation: $3 million. This is roughly the amount that Mynett's consulting firm, the East Street Group, received in payments from Representative Omar's own campaigns. Now, this is really important to point out. These campaign payments were reportedly approved by ethics reviews, but they are still being heavily scrutinized by investigators who are looking into whether the family received any indirect benefits from those campaign funds. So this scrutiny has now become official probes from both the Department of Justice and Congress. Let's take a quick look at how this whole investigation actually got started and unfolded. So the story really begins with reports way back in 2019 about a totally separate fraud scandal in Minnesota. Fast forward to 2024, the Department of Justice under the Biden administration opened a probe. That scrutiny then got a lot more intense in early 2026 under the Trump administration, and now that runs parallel to a whole separate investigation by the House Oversight Committee. So what are they really looking for? Well, the inquiry seems focused on three main things. First, how that $3 million in campaign funds was used.
Second, whether that super fast jump in asset value could be tied to some kind of insider trading. And third, investigators are exploring a potential link to that Minnesota fraud scandal we mentioned, asking if any of the $9 billion from that case was somehow funneled into these ventures.
The view from the congressional side is summed up pretty well by House Oversight Chairman James Comer. He called the explosive growth in assets implausible and said it needs a lot more explanation.
On the other hand, Representative Omar's perspective is that this whole thing is politically motivated. She's framing it as an attack from her political opponents, not as a legitimate inquiry. And that brings us to today. You've got investigations still going, you've got two very different stories being told. So where do things actually stand right now?
And this right here is probably the most important takeaway for now. Despite all the intense scrutiny and the really serious questions being asked, as of late January 2026, no official charges have been filed against either Representative Omar or Tim Mynett.
And all of this leaves us with a much bigger question that this case really puts a spotlight on. I mean, regardless of how this specific investigation turns out, it makes you wonder, do the financial disclosure rules we currently have for members of Congress give us enough transparency? Especially when a spouse's complicated business deals are in the mix? It's a debate that's definitely going to continue long after this case is closed.